Jesus the legend. A fourth category added to the original trilemma argument postulated by Josh McDowell, stating that if Jesus was neither a liar, lunatic, nor legend, then he must be Lord. So tonight, was the biblical Jesus of Nazareth factual history or a remaking into a divine fictional legend?
Once I got over the shock of having, being part of the most famous man who ever lived didn't. Once you got your head around that, what I found was that there was this incredible depth of mystical wisdom available for me through the Western tradition, which I hadn't been able to see before. And that, the paradox is that if there is a man underneath it, then he is probably not the man that you think or I think. Because everyone's got a different Jesus, haven't they?
I'm Rob Melnichuk, and welcome to It's Your Call. Jesus the legend. First of all, let me make the point that there is very little debate today amongst most recognized scholars that the biblical Jesus of Nazareth existed. Apart from those claiming to be mythicists, believing Jesus never existed, such as Richard Carrier, the question as to reliable historical evidence supporting the existence of Jesus of Nazareth is a foregone conclusion. In fact, Dr. Paul Meyer states, there is more evidence that Jesus of Nazareth certainly lived than for most figures of the ancient past. This evidence is of two kinds, internal and external, or, if you will, sacred and secular. In both cases, Dr. Meyer says, the total evidence is so overpowering, so absolute, that only the shallowest of intellects would dare to deny Jesus' existence.
What did we actually know about Jesus Christ the man? What we don't find is this person who appears as some sort of spectre within that historical tableau called Jesus. He doesn't have a mark at all. Now that is a dilemma for those who believe in him, because on the one hand he supposedly overturned the world. It turned the world upside down and triggered off this massive movement, but on the other hand he leaves no trace in the historical record.
Well, a non-believing New Testament scholar and historian Bart Ehrman disagrees. He wrote a book titled Did Jesus Exist?, to substantiate that there is sufficient historical evidence to support that Jesus of Nazareth existed, the Jesus of the New Testament. And Ehrman bases his historical credibility on the Apostle Paul.
One thing is that we don't have any writings from anybody who was one of Jesus' disciples, in my opinion. This is debated. Of course, evangelical scholars might say that Matthew wrote the Gospel of Matthew or that John wrote the Gospel of John, and so those are eyewitnesses. Most critical scholars don't think so. So I don't count that evidence. But what we do have, which is pretty close to that, is the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul was a contemporary of Jesus who didn't know Jesus, but Paul did know Jesus' brother, James, and Jesus' closest disciple, Cephas. And Paul was personally acquainted with them. He tells us about them. And so what I say in my book is that, this is just one small piece of evidence, but if Jesus didn't exist, you would think that his brother would know about it. And so, because his brother, we have somebody who knew his brother. And so I think that's just one little piece of evidence.
Now, where Ehrman deviates, along with many others, is with the person of Jesus as written about in the New Testament. This is where the fourth category of legend comes into play. Is it possible that the biblical Jesus of Nazareth was a legend? Or, to put it another way, was the actual Jesus of Nazareth the person as the Gospels portray him to be? Was the biblical Jesus the real deal? Or was he remade into a divine fictional legend? What do we mean by legend? The legend hypothesis asks us to believe that Jesus was probably a real person. Perhaps he spoke inspiring words and did great deeds. He had a small group of followers and was executed as a rabble-rouser by the Roman authorities, who executed these types as a routine affair, along with criminals and other annoying people. The authorities tossed the body of Jesus to the dogs or threw it in a pit to rot like all the other crowd-rousers and criminals. But a few days or weeks later, stories started. Stories started among the distraught and superstitious followers about visions of Jesus. And the legend started growing from there. These visions turned into an empty tomb, which turned into raised from the dead. Over time, the stories were told and retold and grew into angels and earthquakes and bodily physical appearances, etc. This Jesus of Nazareth became more perfect than he ever was in real life, becoming godlike, as it were. Therefore, the Gospels as we have them today have been shaped and crafted and edited to present Jesus in a certain way to include the claims of divinity, which were not actually spoken by Jesus the man, and thus became Jesus the legend, a remaking into a divine, fictional, charismatic celebrity. The Jesus legend asserts that Jesus in the written Gospels is not the historical Jesus of Nazareth. So, let me ask you to consider this question. Is it possible that the biblical Jesus of Nazareth was a legend? Think about it. Is it likely that a legendary Jesus, a remaking of the historical Jesus from Nazareth, could have possibly influenced as much of human history? Is it even plausible? Is it probable this legendary Jesus could literally split our calendar in half, spiritually transform millions, if not hundreds of millions, of lives over the last 2,000 years? Author the best-selling book of all time without writing a single letter. Supernaturally work wonders of healings and miracles today in the 21st century. Is it likely that a legendary Jesus could accomplish what no other human has ever done in human history? Think about it. If you say yes, then how do you account for divine fiction becoming human fact in literally millions of lives? So, consider the question. Is it possible that the biblical Jesus of Nazareth was a legend